My name is Jason. I'm 42 years old and I've lived in Portland pretty much my whole life. I work as a systems architect, which is basically a fancy way of saying I spend most of my time staring at lines of code and trying to make sense of chaos before anyone else realizes there is any. It's not glamorous, but it pays well and it keeps the lights on. I've always been the quiet guy, the one who lets other people go first in conversation, who gets missed in a group photo and doesn't really mind. My wife, Savannah, is the opposite. She's 39 and the creative director for one of those big marketing firms downtown, the type with exposed brick, kombucha on tap, and an office dog named Beans. She's all confidence and charm, the kind of woman who can walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 10 new best friends. She wears bold lipstick and heels that click with intention. When we first met, I used to joke that she was the sun and I was the shade. I thought we balanced each other out. Now I'm not so sure. We've been married for almost 9 years. No kids by choice, at least in the beginning. There were talks, long ago, about someday, but those conversations faded somewhere between job promotions and endless calendar reminders. We have Luna, our ancient tabby, who's mostly bones and attitude now. Some days, I think she's the only one who still notices when I come home. Things used to be different. There were road trips to the coast, late-night pancakes, movie marathons on the couch. I remember the way she used to laugh at my dumb jokes, how she'd fall asleep with her head on my shoulder, hand resting over my chest like I was her favorite place to be. But somewhere along the way it changed. We changed? Or maybe only she did. Lately, our life feels like a schedule we both agreed to out of politeness. We pass each other in the hallway, in the kitchen, in the bed. We still talk, but it's all practical. Who's picking up the dry cleaning? Did you feed the cat? Are we out of eggs? The word "we" has become rare in our house, replaced by I and you and silence. Especially silence. So when she asked me to come with her to a company charity dinner, I said yes. Not because I wanted to. God, no. I've been to enough of those to know the exact shade of boredom waiting for me. But because I knew if I didn't go, we'd spend another night in different rooms under the same roof, breathing in opposite directions. She didn't even ask like she used to. There was no excitement, no, it'll be fun. Just a short, clipped, you'll come to the gala, right? Like it was a formality. Like I was another part of the outfit she had to account for. So I put on the suit she liked, a charcoal gray, the one she said made me look serious in a good way, and we drove there mostly in silence. She scrolled through her phone while I drove. She didn't play music. She didn't ask me how my day was. I didn't either. It was like we were both waiting for something, though I didn't know what. The venue was one of those glass and marble monstrosities designed to impress investors and in asterisk mid-date introverts. A place where the chandeliers look like they cost more than my car. Inside, the buzz of conversation hit us like a wave, laughter, clinking glasses, people schmoozing like their lives depended on it. Savannah came alive in that atmosphere. I watched her transform the moment we stepped through the door, her smile brighter, her posture straighter, her voice just a touch louder. She greeted people I'd never met with hugs and cheek kisses, using nicknames I didn't recognize. She was magnetic, charismatic, captivating. A version of her I hadn't seen in a long time. A version of her that used to be mine. I followed her around like a satellite, always orbiting, never quite landing. When she introduced me, it was always as my husband, Jason, like a technicality. Not Jay, not my better half, not even a squeeze of the hand. Just a name. A title. A fact. I stood with a drink in hand, something with too many syllables and not enough alcohol, and tried to make small talk with people who thought data structures were something to avoid in their inbox. Most smiled politely and moved on. I didn't mind. I've never been good at these things. I don't do networking. I do stability. I do reliability. I do the invisible work that holds things together even if nobody notices. She was glowing. That's the part that stuck with me. Not just her dress or her makeup or the way she laughed at someone else's joke like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard, but the way her entire face lit up. I hadn't seen her look that alive in years. And it didn't feel like she was glowing for me. I stepped outside at one point just to get some air. I stood near a hedge shaped like a dolphin, sipping whatever was left in my glass, and stared up at the skyline. Portland's beautiful at night, all soft lights and quiet ambitions. I wondered how many couples were up there in those high-rise windows going through the motions like us. Pretending. Enduring. Hoping the silence didn't mean what they feared it meant. Back inside, things started to blur together. Speeches. Toasts. A slideshow. People clapping at things they barely understood. Savannah kept disappearing to catch up with someone, to check on the silent auction, to grab a drink. Each time, she left me behind like an accessory she didn't need for that part of the evening. And I kept telling myself it was fine. It was just one night. I could do this. I could smile and nod and endure. I've done it before. For her. But something felt off. Not in a loud, crashing way. More like the slow creak of wood under pressure, the kind of sound you don't notice until it's too late. The way her eyes skimmed past me when she laughed. The way she stood just a little too close to certain people. The way she didn't reach for my hand even once, not even out of habit. And then I saw it. A small, almost unnoticeable moment. But it hit me like a punch to the chest. She was across the room talking to a group of people and she laughed, really laughed. One of those head back, eyes closed kind of laughs. The kind I hadn't heard in years. And beside her, a man I didn't recognize leaned in, just slightly, and said something in her ear. She didn't pull away. She didn't flinch. She just smiled and let it happen. I don't know why that moment stuck with me. Maybe it was the familiarity of it. The ease. Maybe it was the way she seemed to forget I existed in that moment. Or maybe it was because, in my gut, I knew that was the moment everything started to unravel. I didn't say anything. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't march over and demand answers. That's not who I am. Instead, I stood there quietly, feeling like the floor had tilted ever so slightly, like the room was no longer solid under my feet. That night, as we drove home, she asked me if I had fun. I said sure. She nodded, not really listening. And I stared out the window, wondering when exactly I became a stranger in my own marriage. Because something changed that night. Not loudly. Not all at once. But something cracked. And the thing about cracks is, they always start small, just a hairline, just a whisper. But they always spread. At first, I thought it was just in my head. After that dinner, I kept replaying things, moments, glances, silences, like I was stuck in a loop I couldn't break out of. I told myself I was being paranoid. That maybe I was reading too much into nothing. But when you live with someone long enough, you learn the rhythm of them. You know when something's off. Even if they don't say it. Especially when they don't say it. The first crack, the one that stopped feeling like imagination, came a week later. Savannah was in the shower and I was looking for a pen. She always kept her planner on the kitchen counter, color-coded, obsessively neat, with little sticky tabs for meetings and reminders. Normally, I'd never open it. But that night, I needed something to write on and her planner was right there. Inside, tucked between the pages like an afterthought, was a card. Not a business card. It was small, ivory-colored, with just 2 gold-embossed letters, R.C. That was it. No company name, no logo, no context. And they weren't my initials. I stood there holding it, something cold settling into the pit of my stomach. She never mentioned anyone by those initials. Not even in passing. When I asked her later, just casually, like, hey, whose card was that in your planner? She barely blinked. Said it was from someone she met at the gala. Some creative director she'd crossed paths with. No big deal. But the way she answered, the way she didn't look at me when she said it, was what stayed with me. After that, things started to feel different. I began noticing small shifts, subtle but undeniable. A new perfume, rich floral, not her usual crisp citrus or vanilla scent. It lingered on her scarves, on the bathroom towels, on our sheets. I asked her about it once offhandedly. She laughed and said a coworker had recommended it, that she was trying something more grown-up. But she never wore it when we were together. She changed her phone password. That was another thing. We never snooped on each other, but we both knew each other's codes. It was never a thing. One night I went to check the time on her phone, just out of habit, and it locked me out. She was across the room and saw the screen. Oh, sorry, she said. Work policy. We're required to update our passwords every quarter. Except, I work in IT. That's not a thing in her field. Not for personal phones. Then there were the evening meetings. At first, they made sense, clients with different time zones, last-minute presentations, creative sessions that ran late. But they started happening more often. Every Tuesday. Then Thursdays. Sometimes weekends. Always around the same time. And when I'd ask what they were working on, she'd get vague. Just a pitch. A rebrand. Something I can't talk about yet. And then there was the laughter. Not during a movie. Not at a joke. In the shower. I'd be in the kitchen, doing dishes, and hear her in the bathroom, voice lifted, giggling, light and breathy like it used to be when we were still new. But she never talked to me like that anymore. She'd come out with her hair up in a towel, texting as she walked past me without a word. I tried to talk myself out of it. Told myself maybe she was just tired. That we'd been distant. That maybe we'd both been on autopilot and this was just the drift of long relationships. But something deep in me wouldn't let it go. I started keeping mental notes. What days she left the house. What time she got home. When she seemed nervous. When she got defensive. The nail in the coffin came on a random Sunday. She said she was out running errands, groceries, dry cleaning, maybe a stop by the florist. I stayed home, fixed a cabinet hinge that had been loose forever, vacuumed. Luna, old and judgmental as ever, curled on the window ledge watching traffic. I just finished making coffee when her phone, forgotten on the kitchen island, buzzed. Voicemail. I never touch her phone. Never. But it lit up again. This time, a notification, you have one new message. I shouldn't have listened. But I did. A man's voice. Confident. Soft. I booked the room just like before. See you in 5:03. Don't forget your dress. That was it. 16 seconds. But that voice didn't belong to a coworker. And it damn sure wasn't a friend. It had that tone. That warmth. The kind of voice you reserve for someone you're not supposed to love out loud. I stood frozen, the phone still in my hand, the coffee growing cold on the counter. I wanted to throw it across the room. I wanted to cry. Scream. But mostly, I felt numb. Like someone had pulled a rug from under my life and I was floating in the space before the fall. When she came home later, bags in hand, humming to herself like everything was normal, I didn't say anything. I didn't know how. I just watched her unload the groceries, place the flowers in a vase, and kiss me on the cheek like nothing had changed. Except everything had. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. I could hear the faint whir of her breath, the occasional shift of her body as she moved in her sleep. I wondered if she was dreaming of him. Of 503. Of moments I hadn't been invited to. I couldn't help but start playing back every recent moment like evidence. The sudden wardrobe upgrades. The photos she'd stopped posting of us. The nights she left without saying goodbye, the way she stared at her phone like it held more of her heart than I did. I thought about confronting her. About asking directly. But what would she say? That it was a mistake? That I misunderstood? That it was just a friend? No. I needed to be sure. I needed to see it for myself. Because once you hear something like that voicemail, your brain starts betraying you. You start imagining things, scenes, conversations, touches, and you don't know what's real anymore. You question everything. The person beside you becomes a stranger wearing a familiar face. And still, I waited. Partly because I hoped it wasn't true. Partly because I wasn't ready to face what would come after. But the thing about truth is, it doesn't care if you're ready. It shows up anyway. The gala was exactly what I expected it to be, over the top, underwhelming, and filled with people pretending to like each other. A second round of the same performance, just 2 weeks after the first one. This time it was a fundraiser for their new outreach initiative. Community elevation, they called it. I guess rich people like to feel noble when they sip wine and bid on auction spa packages. Savannah insisted I come again. Said it would mean something. I didn't know what it was supposed to mean, but I nodded like a man who still had something left to lose. Inside, though, I was hollowed out. That voicemail, the one I'd replayed 100 times in my head, echoed in everything she said now. Every laugh, every glance, every moment we spent together carried a question mark. That night, she wore a deep emerald dress, one I'd never seen before. It fit her too well to be new. Like it had already been worn. Chosen. Approved. Her hair was swept up, her eyes sharper than usual, lips painted dark. She looked stunning. But not for me. We barely spoke during the car ride. She hummed along to a playlist she said was curated by her team, some atmospheric indie stuff that sounded like elevator music for a spaceship. I kept my hands on the wheel, focused on the road, but my mind was miles away. I had a headache blooming at the base of my skull, the kind that feels like a warning. The event was at one of those converted loft spaces downtown with exposed beams and Edison bulbs that made everything feel rustic and curated. There were plants suspended in midair, menus printed on handmade paper, and bartenders in suspenders shaking cocktails with names I couldn't pronounce. She disappeared almost immediately, pulled into a circle of creatives with mismatched blazers and oversized glasses. I drifted near the bar, nursing something smoky and overpriced, my eyes scanning the room, waiting. Watching. Then I saw him. Tall, probably late 40s, sharp suit, salt and pepper hair. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed. He wore a silver pin on the lapel of his jacket, shaped like a hawk in mid-dive. The same pin I found weeks ago in the bottom of Savannah's tote bag, attached to a blank security badge. At the time, she said it was from some branding campaign. One of our clients. Just a prototype. I didn't press it then. Now I knew better. He walked through the crowd like he owned it. People greeted him with nods, a few with claps on the back. Not overly flashy, but enough that I knew he was someone. He paused just a few feet for me to greet a colleague. I didn't look away. Neither did he. Then Savannah appeared. She was smiling, holding a glass of white wine. As she made her way toward us, her eyes locked on his. There was something in that look, soft, immediate, unguarded. I'd seen that look before. Years ago. When it was still meant for me. She brushed past me on her way to the bar, just close enough that her arm grazed his. Her fingers lightly touched the back of his hand in passing. It wasn't accidental. And it wasn't for anyone else to notice. But I saw it. They didn't speak. Not then. But they didn't need to. Their eyes met again, a long, slow pull like magnets finding each other across a crowded room. And in that moment it hit me with absolute clarity. This was it. The confirmation I didn't want but already knew. The truth in real time, unfolding right in front of me without shame, without apology. I didn't say anything. I didn't walk over. I didn't make a scene. That's not who I am. That's never been me. Instead, I waited. Savannah eventually circled back to where I stood. Her smile was automatic, her arm looping through mine with practiced ease. "Having fun?" she asked. I turned toward her slowly, the air between us suddenly colder. "Not after this," I said softly. She blinked. Her expression didn't crack, but her posture did. Just slightly. A subtle exhale like a deflating balloon. She tried to cover it with a half-laugh. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just set my glass on a nearby table and let my arm fall away from hers. Her hand lingered in the air for a second, then dropped. We stood there in silence for what felt like a lifetime. "You're overthinking," she said finally, her voice low, measured. "Am I?" I asked. Another pause. "You're being paranoid. That's what people say when they're guilty and out of excuses." She looked away then, her eyes searching the room. Not for a response. Not for me. For an exit. "I need air," she said, already moving. I didn't follow. I left 15 minutes later. No big scene. No tears. No dramatic confrontation. Just quiet steps out the door and down the street, my breath visible in the cold night air, each one feeling like it carried a decade's worth of exhaustion. When I got home, I sat in the dark for hours. No lights, no TV. Just me and the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Luna jumped onto the couch beside me at one point and curled up without a sound. She always could sense when something was broken. My phone buzzed a few times. I didn't look. I didn't sleep much that night, and when I did, my dreams were filled with half-finished conversations and hotel room doors that never fully closed. In the morning, Savannah was already in the kitchen. She was dressed in workout gear, pretending to read the back of a cereal box. I said nothing as I grabbed a mug and poured my coffee. The silence between us was heavier than ever. "I think we need to talk," she said finally. "No," I replied, taking a sip. "I think we need to stop pretending." She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, setting the box down and staring at her hands. That was the moment it was over. Not with a bang. Not with a breakdown. But with the quiet understanding that something had been broken for a long time. And neither of us had the tools or maybe the will to fix it. There's something surreal about watching your marriage collapse in real time. No screaming. No cheating cliché caught red-handed. Just an unspoken truth that finally made its way into the light. She never said the words. She didn't have to. I saw everything I needed to see. And what you see, once you truly see it, you can't unsee. I didn't come home the next day. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a text. I just turned off my phone, packed a small bag with 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, and my laptop and drove. The kind of drive where the destination didn't matter, only the distance. I stopped at a gas station on the outskirts of town, stared at the road ahead while the tank filled, and then kept going. No music, no GPS. Just the hum of the engine and the low static of my thoughts. It wasn't about running away. Not really. It was about space. About silence, the right kind this time. The kind that lets your brain finally breathe after months of pretending everything was fine. Here's what I didn't expect. I felt calm. Not numb. Not angry. Just still. Like someone had pressed pause on the chaos inside my head, and for once I could hear myself think. What I thought about was this: a few weeks earlier, back before the voicemail, the dress, the hawk pin, I had bought 2 plane tickets to San Diego. It was supposed to be a surprise. A getaway. A reset. I had planned it for her birthday. She'd always said she missed the ocean, that she wanted a break from gray skies and glass offices. I found a quiet little hotel near La Jolla, the kind with actual keys and a balcony overlooking the water. I booked it thinking maybe if we just got out of our routine, just breathed different air, we could find each other again. I had the tickets in my glove box. I don't know why I went to the airport that day. Maybe because part of me still believed there was something left to salvage. Or maybe I just needed to see if she would choose me. The terminal was quiet for a Thursday. I sat near gate B6 with a coffee I didn't drink and watched people hug, wave, whisper goodbyes. The gate agent announced a slight delay. I didn't care. I was locked in the kind of moment that feels suspended in time, just me and the weight of 100 what-ifs. Savannah arrived 10 minutes before boarding. I didn't think she'd come. I hadn't told her where I was going, but she figured it out. She looked polished, as always, slim black coat, ankle boots, hair pulled back. Her eyes scanned the gate area until they landed on me. No smile. Just a slow, careful walk toward where I was sitting. "You bought 2 tickets," she said, her voice soft, unsure. I nodded. "I did." She sat down next to me, leaving a gap between us. Not much, but enough to feel like a question. "You want me to come?" she asked. "Do you?" I asked back, not looking at her. She paused. "I don't know what you expect." "I don't expect anything," I said. "I just thought maybe you'd want to try. One last time." She exhaled slowly, folding her hands in her lap. Her nails were done. Always were. A soft mauve this time. "I can't," she said finally. "Can't or won't. Does it matter?" It used to. She didn't argue. Just stared straight ahead as the final boarding call echoed through the terminal. I stood up, grabbing my bag. "You're being dramatic," she said suddenly, her voice sharp in that way she used when she wanted to shut something down before it became real. I turned back to her. "And you're being dishonest. We're both playing roles in a story that's already ended." She looked at me, finally really looked, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her expression. Regret? Anger? Exhaustion? I couldn't tell anymore. Maybe it didn't matter. "I have work," she said, like it explained everything. "I know," I said. "You always do." Then I boarded the plane. I didn't look back. The flight was quiet. I had a window seat. The man next to me nodded politely, then fell asleep before takeoff. As we lifted off the ground, I watched the city shrink beneath me, tiny roads, tiny people, tiny problems. I felt something uncoil in my chest. Not joy. Not yet. But something close. Something like freedom. San Diego was warm. The sky was open and impossibly blue. I rented a car, drove straight to the hotel, and checked in under my name and hers. The desk clerk didn't even blink. I walked into a room with 2 keycards and a bed that felt too big. I stood on the balcony that evening and watched the sun set into the ocean, orange bleeding into pink and gold. I thought about how many sunsets I'd missed, sitting behind a glowing screen or waiting in silence beside someone who didn't want to be there. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went out by myself. No plan. No schedule. I walked until I found a small taco stand, grabbed a seat, and just existed. The food was messy and incredible. The beer was cold. Nobody knew my name and nobody expected anything from me. It was beautiful. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I jogged along the beach barefoot, letting the sand pull at my heels. I didn't have headphones in. I didn't need them. The sound of the waves was enough. I stayed 3 days. On the last day, I wrote a note, not to Savannah but to myself. I wrote everything I needed to hear, that I mattered, that I had tried, that walking away wasn't failure, it was survival. I folded it and left it in the bedside drawer like a time capsule, a reminder for the next person who needed to read it. When I returned home, I didn't tell her I was back. I didn't ask where she'd been. We passed each other in the hallway like ghosts. That weekend, I packed a second bag. I didn't tell her where I was going. And this time, she didn't ask. Because when someone shows you they're willing to lose you without a fight, believe them. That trip to San Diego? It wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of me. I didn't move back in after San Diego. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Just a little more space, a little more time to breathe. But deep down, I think I knew. Once you taste the kind of quiet freedom, the kind that doesn't come with conditions or careful conversations, it's hard to go back to stale routines and second-guessing everything you say. I rented a motel room a few miles from the coast, one of those forgotten roadside places with faded signs and numbers painted over 3 times. The walls were thin, the sheets scratchy, and the air conditioning had 2 moods, glacial and apocalypse. But it was mine. Just mine. And for the first time in what felt like years, that was enough. Savannah's messages started 2 days after I left. The first one was simple. "Where are you?" Then, "I'm worried. Call me. Please. This isn't fair." I read every one of them. I just didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice not to shake if I tried. Or worse, soften. Then came the shift. "You're acting like a child. You're blowing this way out of proportion. This is your fault too, Jason. I didn't cheat. You never asked." That one hit different. Like she was rewriting the script, hoping I'd forget what I'd seen. What I'd heard. What she never denied. Eventually, the tone changed again. "I miss you." I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. Please come home. But I couldn't. Because home wasn't a place anymore. It was a memory with cracks I couldn't seal shut. And no amount of apology could undo the ache of knowing I had become optional in someone else's life. Still, I kept the messages. All of them. I guess part of me needed the evidence, proof that I wasn't making it all up in my head. That I wasn't the crazy one, the cold one, the one who gave up too soon. I started hearing things through mutual friends. Nothing direct, just breadcrumbs in conversation. One said her team was under internal review. Another mentioned late meetings and HR complaint, whispers about favoritism. The Hawkpin man, who I now knew was named Ryan Cross, seemed to come up too often. Too close to projects she was never supposed to be involved in. Too connected to the fast-tracked promotions that didn't make sense until now. The pieces were falling apart and I wasn't even in the room. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel anything. That's the strange part of betrayal. Eventually, the fire goes out. What's left is ash. Cold. Weightless. A reminder, not a warning. One night, about a week after I left, I walked down to the shore. It was late and the tide was high, crashing against the rocks with rhythm and rage. I sat there watching the moon light up the water and I let myself feel everything at once. The anger, the sadness, the embarrassment. The love that had become something else. The grief of watching someone you thought you knew disappear without ever leaving the room. I cried. Not because I wanted her back. I cried because I didn't. Because I finally understood that some people won't fight for you. Not because they don't care. But because somewhere along the line, they stopped seeing you as someone worth the effort. And that realization? That's what breaks you. Not the lie. Not the cheating. The quiet indifference that follows. The next morning, I opened my email to a message from her. The subject line was blank. The body was 4 paragraphs long. She wrote about exhaustion. About how the world felt heavy and how she didn't know how to ask for help. She said it started small, just drinks, just someone to vent to. That she didn't mean for it to turn into anything. I was lost, she wrote. You were always so steady. I didn't want to break you with how messy I felt. That line made me laugh out loud in that sad, sarcastic way. Like she was trying to protect me by hiding the very thing that tore us apart. Like silence was a kindness. At the end, she said, I never stopped loving you. I didn't reply. Because love without honesty is just manipulation and makeup. I started detaching in pieces. I unsubscribed from her Spotify family plan. Closed our shared grocery list. Logged out of the Netflix account we'd built a watch list on. I stopped checking her socials. Stopped asking mutual friends if she was okay. Not out of malice. But because I needed to reclaim my peace one click at a time. She sent more emails. More messages. Voice notes, even. The kind you don't expect, soft, late-night recordings where you can hear the echo of tears in the background. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I keep replaying everything you said at the airport. I don't expect forgiveness. I just don't want to disappear completely from your life. But she already had. Because when someone lies to you long enough, you stop listening for the truth in their voice. You start hearing only the silence between the words. I didn't block her. I didn't erase her. I just stopped responding. I stopped giving her the version of me that forgives too quickly. The one who always circles back, always softens, always makes space even when there's none left. I stopped being the man who waits at doors no one opens. The final message she sent was just one sentence. Please tell me this isn't the end. I stared at it for a long time. Then I powered off the phone. And I let the silence answer for me. Savannah's messages turned into letters, handwritten, full of nostalgia and regret. She wrote about loneliness, about feeling invisible, about how the affair just happened. She said she was spiraling and I was the only constant. But her words came too late. I read them all, quietly, once each, then slid them into a drawer I never opened again. I didn't hate her. I just couldn't carry her guilt on top of my own pain. Forgiveness stopped being the finish line. I no longer needed her apology to validate my decision. What I needed was peace. And that meant silence. A month later, I moved into a small house near the woods, quiet, old, and imperfect in a way that felt honest. I jogged, read books with bent covers, and skipped stones alone. At a cafe, I met Maggie, a warm voice, lavender nails, and eyes that didn't ask for more than I could give. We talked, laughed, nothing rushed. I didn't need to be someone else. I didn't hate Savannah anymore. But I couldn't be that man again, the one who swallowed every red flag. I finally chose myself. And for once,